Hello, and welcome to Whispers of Crime. I'm Hannah, and today I'm sharing a case that's as heartbreaking as it is horrifying. It's the story of two best friends, Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Peña, whose lives were brutally taken just as they were stepping into the brightest chapter of their youth. They were full of dreams, joy, and laughter. Your typical teenage girls, soaking in the summer sunshine, planning sleepovers, and obsessing over music and boys. But instead of long days at the mall and late-night chats, their summer turned into a nightmare, one that would shake an entire community to its core. This is their story. Elizabeth Christine Peña was born on June 21st, 1977, in Houston, Texas, to Adolph and Melissa Peña. She was their first child, and the bond she shared with both parents, especially her mother, was incredibly deep. 2 years later, Elizabeth became a big sister when Michael was born. Like many siblings, the two were thick as thieves and relentless rivals at the same time. They shared a room with a bunk bed and fought over everything, from TV spots to who got the better cereal box prize. Their parents often said it was exhausting, but underneath all the squabbles, there was fierce, unwavering love. Elizabeth protected Michael like a lioness, and he returned the favor every time. When Elizabeth was 10, little Rachel joined the family, and Elizabeth embraced the role of big sister wholeheartedly. She looked after Rachel with such tenderness that her parents often called her Mini-Mom. Whether it was feeding her, entertaining her, or helping with diapers, Elizabeth stepped up with joy. As the Peña kids got older, the arguments with Michael faded into mutual respect and friendship. Their chaotic sibling days gave way to quieter moments of connection and understanding. The Peña family home sat on Lamont Lane in Northwest Houston, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath space near T.C. Jester Park. The neighborhood was safe, peaceful, and ideal for raising children. Elizabeth flourished there. Her toothy grin and bubbly charm lit up every room she walked into. There was just one thing about Elizabeth that made bath time in their house a challenge. She absolutely hated washing her hair. Her thick, curly locks tangled easily, and every attempt to shampoo them became a full-blown drama. The Peñas often resorted to using the kitchen sink, while Elizabeth screamed bloody murder. But aside from that, she was an energetic, fun-loving teen with a heart of gold. Though she had a magnetic personality, school wasn't exactly her top priority. Her father used to joke that Elizabeth was more interested in looking good than getting straight A's. And it wasn't a lie. She was beautiful. Long dark hair, expressive brown eyes, and a beaming smile made her one of the most popular girls at school. But what truly captivated people was her warmth and vibrant personality. Elizabeth loved the beach, the sound of waves, the warmth of the sun. In 1993, the family took a trip to Florida that became one of her favorite memories. Her father often said she looked the happiest he had ever seen her during that drive back home. Still, like many teens, Elizabeth went through a bit of a rebellious phase. Just before high school, she started hanging out with a crowd her dad disapproved of. Not necessarily bad kids, but aimless ones. No drugs or crime, just pushing boundaries. She snuck out of the house twice, through her bedroom window, when tensions rose at home. Both times, she stayed with friends and returned after things cooled off. Her dad, Adolf, was deeply protective. He warned her about boys and the intentions some of them had. He didn't forbid her from dating, but urged her to be cautious and aware. It was around this time that Elizabeth had her first intimate experiences. Her father's fear wasn't control. It was concern, the kind only a parent can know, to give Elizabeth a better chance and perhaps distance her from negative influences. Her parents enrolled her in a private Catholic high school, St. Pius. But it backfired. She was expelled just 6 weeks in. That moment became a turning point. Elizabeth made a choice to change. She cut ties with her old group and transferred to Waltrip High School. There, she found a better environment, and even more importantly, she found Jennifer. Jennifer Ertman was the opposite of Elizabeth in many ways. Blonde, blue-eyed, and quieter in demeanor. But their hearts were aligned. They clicked instantly. Jennifer was born on August 15, 1978, to Sandy and Randy Ertman. She was their miracle baby, born after years of infertility. Her arrival was so unexpected, it felt like a gift. Sandy was 35, considered a geriatric pregnancy, and Jennifer became the center of their universe. She had a radiant sense of humor and a laugh that could lift anyone's spirits. A true daddy's girl, Jennifer brought light and laughter into every room. Her interests evolved from go-karting and baseball cards to obsessing over New Kids on the Block. Posters of Donnie and Joey lined her bedroom walls. Jennifer was kind, respectful, and incredibly responsible. Her parents only remembered yelling at her 3 times, ever. She didn't lie, cheat, or steal. She was raised with strong values and lived by them. She loved swimming, but was modest to a fault, always wearing baggy t-shirts and knee-length shorts, even at the pool. Style didn't matter. Comfort did. Still, she embraced her teen years with excitement, piercing her ears, wearing makeup, and mimicking hairstyles from Beverly Hills. Jewelry became her signature. Gold chains, letter J rings, and a Disney Goofy watch she never outgrew. At 13, Jennifer asked for house keys so she could let herself in after visiting friends. She'd earned the trust. By 14, she begged for a pager, and she got one. Her parents hesitated at first. Pagers were often associated with drug dealers at the time, but Jennifer argued it was for safety. Eventually, they agreed. Jennifer and Elizabeth only lived 15 minutes apart. Elizabeth in the peaceful neighborhood near T.C. Jester Park. Jennifer in a more transient part of the Heights near the highway. Their parents supported their friendship wholeheartedly. Jennifer always greeted Adolf Peña with a polite, "Hello, Mr. Peña," and her sunny disposition quickly won over the whole family. By summer 1993, the girls had completed their first year at Waltrip High School. They were excited. This summer was supposed to be everything. Elizabeth had a boyfriend. Her grades had improved. Her sweet 16th birthday had just passed. She received a silky purple bra, her first grown-up gift, a symbol of stepping into womanhood. She was thrilled. Then came June 24th. Jennifer was dropped off at Elizabeth's. They grabbed tacos from a nearby Mexican restaurant and walked back home, only to be playfully heckled by Elizabeth's dad as he drove by. "What are 2 cute girls like you doing, walking around alone?" he teased. They laughed, rolled their eyes, and waved him off. Later that evening, Elizabeth's mom drove the girls to their friend Gina's apartment in the Silver Creek complex. The plan was simple: hang out, then head home in time for Jennifer's midnight curfew. At Gina's, they chatted, laughed, and called Jennifer's mom from the house phone when she paged her. "We're just hanging out," Jennifer said. "I'll be home soon." Around 10:20 p.m., Jennifer reminded Elizabeth they needed to leave. They said their goodbyes. But leaving took longer than planned. By the time they stepped out, it was 10:40. A 30-minute walk back home, and only 20 minutes to curfew. To save time, they decided to take a shortcut through T.C. Jester Park. It was familiar and peaceful, even at night. What could go wrong? They walked through a gap in the chain-link fence near Gina's apartment and headed for the railroad bridge. It was 10:45 p.m. They were trying to do the right thing, get home on time. They had no idea that this choice, this small detour, would be their last. It was a warm June night in Houston. Jennifer and Elizabeth had only 20 minutes to make it home before curfew. They were laughing, still high on the energy of summer and teenage freedom. They peeled through the gap in the fence behind Gina's apartment complex and made their way to the railroad tracks. Their plan was simple: follow the trail by the bayou, cut through T.C. Jester Park, and be home before midnight. They'd taken this path before. It was familiar, even comforting. But on that night, it became a corridor into darkness. Back at Jennifer's house, her mom, Sandy, jolted awake at 4 a.m. Something felt wrong. She couldn't place it at first. It was just a light, the one she always left on for Jennifer. She looked across the hallway. The light was still on. Jennifer never left that light burning unless she was home. If she'd decided to stay at a friend's house, she always called. Always. But there was no call. Sandy paced to Jennifer's room. The bed was untouched. The sheets were still perfectly made. She began paging her daughter over and over, trying not to panic. Maybe Jennifer had just fallen asleep at a friend's house. Maybe her pager was turned off. Maybe it wasn't anything serious. She climbed back into bed, forcing herself to stay calm. But her heart was pounding. Her mind raced. By 6:30 a.m., Randy, Jennifer's father, woke up. Sandy hadn't told him yet. She didn't want Jennifer to get in trouble. But now, she had no choice. She confessed Jennifer never came home. She made up a quick excuse. Maybe Jennifer had mentioned staying at a friend's place. But Randy was growing anxious. By 11 a.m., their daughter was still missing, and Sandy finally admitted the truth. That's when Randy picked up the phone and called the Peña house. No one answered. He tried Gina's number. Again, nothing. He couldn't sit still. Randy got in the car and drove straight to Elizabeth's house. The neighborhood was too quiet. He pounded on the front door. Nothing. He circled to the back, knocking on every window, calling for the girls. Still, silence. He raced home. Sandy was still calling every number in Jennifer's address book, flipping through pages, hoping someone, anyone, had heard from them. Eventually, Gina called back. She had been at summer school and missed their messages. Her voice trembled. She told Randy she hadn't seen Jennifer or Elizabeth since the night before. They had planned to walk home. Randy picked her up and drove straight back to the Peña house. Gina pointed to Elizabeth's bedroom window. Randy was frantic, pounding on the glass hard enough to shatter it. Neighbors peeked outside, alarmed. Gina feared they'd call the police, but Randy didn't care. He just wanted to find his daughter. He dropped Gina off and returned home to Sandy. She was still desperately dialing every number in Jennifer's book. Her sister, Jennifer's aunt, also paged her repeatedly, thinking maybe Jennifer would respond to her. But still, no reply. Later that afternoon, Randy finally reached Elizabeth's parents, Adolf and Melissa. They hadn't seen their daughter since the previous evening either. They had also been paging her all day, assuming she'd spent the night at Jennifer's. The truth sank in. Each family thought their daughter was with the other. That's when Randy called the police to report both girls missing. But the Houston Police Department didn't take it seriously. They treated it like another runaway case. It's a frustrating, all too common response, especially in the 90s. The girls were teenagers. Maybe they just ran off. Maybe they were being dramatic. Maybe they'd be back by morning. But their parents knew better. Jennifer and Elizabeth weren't the kind of girls who would disappear without a word. While the police dragged their feet, the families mobilized. Melissa drove Adolf to Gina's apartment, the last place the girls had been seen. Adolf searched the entire exterior of the complex, then the park, then the railroad tracks. He tore through brush, tossed over rocks, broke branches, desperate to retrace the steps his daughter might have taken. Nothing. Back home, Randy contacted the media, but even they were dismissive. They didn't see the urgency. Just two teenage girls, probably off somewhere. So Randy took matters into his own hands. By Saturday morning, June 26th, he printed 3,000 missing person flyers with photos of Jennifer and Elizabeth. He and Sandy canvassed Houston with the Peñas, stapling the posters anywhere they could. They blanketed the Spring Hill apartments. They posted flyers in laundromats, entryways, light poles, anywhere people would see. Some residents tore them down, calling them an eyesore. Can you imagine? But the families didn't stop. For every flyer removed, 2 more went up. Then, on Sunday, June 27th, 3 days after the girls disappeared, a chilling call came in to Crime Stoppers. The man identified himself only as Gonzalez. He claimed to know where the girls' bodies were. He said they could be found in a wooded area near T.C. Jester Boulevard and White Oak Bayou. Then he hung up. Houston PD responded. Officers were dispatched to search the park, but found nothing. Then Gonzalez called again. This time, he dialed 911 directly. He gave more precise instructions. On Monday, June 28th, just after noon, Officer Mike Cromwell returned to T.C. Jester Park. He walked near the tracks behind Gina's apartment complex. He scanned the dense woods. At first, he saw nothing, but something urged him to search the opposite side of the tracks, the area Elizabeth's father hadn't checked. There was a path along the embankment, leading to a patch of trees. As Cromwell parted the brush, his heart sank. Clothing, scattered. Then deeper into the woods, he saw what looked like a body. He couldn't reach it directly. It was too overgrown. So he circled around and pushed through from the other side. There, just 20 feet in, he found 2 bodies, partially clothed, lying feet apart. He called for backup. Detectives Brian Horowitz and Beverly Trumbull, along with Sergeant Bob Parrish, arrived and began their grim examination. The first girl lay on her back. Her shirt had been pulled over her head, exposing a purple lace bra. One purple high-top Converse sneaker still clung to her foot. Her arms were stretched above her head. The Texas heat had taken its toll. Flies buzzed around her. Her body was badly decomposed. Investigators could see she had been violated. The flies had laid eggs, and maggots had begun eating away at the tissue, especially around her lower abdomen and wounds on her rib cage and belly button. They didn't remove the shirt just yet. They moved on to the second victim. Her body was bloated and darkened by the 95-degree heat. Her fingernails were painted bright red, but her face was gone. Animals had gotten to her. Her jaw hung to one side. Her eyes and tongue were missing. Her right arm had decomposed down to the bone. The left had turned nearly black. It was a nightmare scene. Back at the Spring Hill complex, Gina waited anxiously. Then her phone rang. It was a friend, Vanessa Rivera. She was crying. "They found them," she said. "They found Jennifer and Elizabeth. Their bodies." Gina froze. "What are you talking about?" Vanessa sobbed. "Right outside your apartment. The police are there now." Girls ran outside and crossed the street. A crowd had already formed. Crime scene tape was everywhere. Police were swarming the woods. Nearby, Sean O'Brien, a neighbor, was yelling at two young boys. "You're not allowed in that park anymore. Those bastards who did this better be caught." But Gina barely heard him. Her heart was in her throat. Could it really be her friends? She hoped, prayed it wasn't them. At that moment, Randy Ertman arrived on the scene. He shoved through the crowd, desperate. "Does she have blonde hair?" he shouted at the officers. "Blonde hair?" He was crying, begging. Officers tried to hold him back. They couldn't confirm anything yet. The bodies were too decomposed for visual ID. They would need dental records. Randy drove home to get Jennifer's records. But when he arrived, his wife Sandy was gone. A friend called. Sandy had fainted when she heard the news. She'd collapsed and was now in the hospital, sedated. She couldn't handle the shock. Randy was now alone, facing the reality that his daughter was likely dead. The medical examiners transported the bodies on 2 gurneys, wheeling them through the crowd. News cameras rolled. People whispered. Someone cried out, "Why? They were just walking home. Just walking home." That line echoed across Houston. Just walking home.
They were just walking home, not even that far away. And somebody has to do that to them. Why, you know?
Melissa and Adolph Peña found out through the evening news. They were sitting on the couch when the anchor confirmed it. Elizabeth's body had been identified. Melissa let out a sound Adolph said he would never forget. Her face shattered. Her mouth opened in disbelief, and the tears didn't stop. They had lost their firstborn child, and now the media, who hadn't cared days earlier, wouldn't stop calling. The same reporters who ignored their pleas were now hounding them for interviews. It felt like betrayal. And the police? They had brushed it off from the start. But the truth was worse than anyone had imagined. Jennifer and Elizabeth weren't missing. They had been murdered, brutally. And the horror of what happened to them was just beginning to unfold. The discovery of the 2 bodies led Houston detectives to revisit the anonymous tip that brought them there in the first place. That second call, the one made directly to 911, was traceable, and that changed everything. It led them to a young man named Joe Cantu. Joe was 20 years old, married, and trying to build a life for himself. He worked as a phlebotomist at a local blood donation center. The The call came from his home on Ashland Street, just 10 minutes from the park. When detectives knocked on Joe's door on June 28th, they had no idea what they were walking into. Joe lived there with his wife, Christina, and his younger brother, Peter Cantu, who was 18. As officers questioned Joe and Christina, the story that spilled out was darker than they'd imagined. On the night of June 25th, around 12:30 a.m., Christina answered a knock at the door. Standing there were 3 teenage boys, Jose Medellin, 18, Efren Perez, 17, and a third teen they didn't recognize, Raul Villarreal, 17. All of them looked off. Jose was covered in blood and had a large scratch on his neck. Efren had a deep red stain on his pants, right near his crotch. Raul had dried blood on his brow and down the side of his jeans. They looked like they'd been in a fight, but it was different. Their eyes were wild, their clothes were dirty, they reeked of something unspoken. Jose grinned and said, "Let's just say we had a lot of fun," and then the boys laughed. Loud, unhinged laughter. Joe and Christina were shaken. These were friends of Peter's, a group known as the Black and Whites, a self-proclaimed gang of 6 boys from the neighborhood who pretended to be tougher than they really were. Joe asked what had happened. That's when Efren removed his shirt, the one soaked in blood, and said, "You'll hear about it on the news." Joe, panicking, burned the shirt in their backyard. Still trying to believe this might just be a fight gone wrong, he pressed them for details. But what came next stunned both him and Christina. Jose and the others started bragging, mocking the girls they had assaulted. They said the girls begged for their lives. Jose claimed he could prove one of them was a virgin. He pointed to the stain on his underwear and called it virgin blood. Christina froze. She had her own trauma. She'd been sexually assaulted before. Hearing these boys laugh about what they had done broke her. She cried quietly in the bedroom while the others joked in the living room. Joe asked the unthinkable, "What did you do with the girls?" Efren answered without emotion, "Left them in the woods." The following day, Christina begged Joe to do the right thing. Joe was torn. This was his brother's gang, his family, but the weight of what he had heard crushed him. Eventually, Christina convinced him to call Crime Stoppers anonymously. Still, the first call didn't lead officers to the bodies. So Joe called again, this time dialing 911 and giving more details. That second call led Officer Mike Cromwell to TC Jester Park, where he found Jennifer and Elizabeth's remains. Now detectives had enough information to arrest the suspects. At 3:30 a.m. on June 29th, Houston police began sweeping through the neighborhood, arresting all 6 suspects involved in the murders. Peter Cantu, 18. Sean O'Brien, 18. Efren Perez, 17. Raul Villarreal, 17. Jose Medellin, 18. Uni Medellin, 14. Jose's younger brother. Real name, Venancio. Sean O'Brien tried to run, but was quickly caught. Inside his apartment, investigators found personal items belonging to the girls, including the other half of the red belt, believed to be used in one of the murders. Let's talk about who these boys were, because understanding their backgrounds helps explain how they reached this point. First, Peter Cantu, the so-called leader of the Black and Whites. Peter was the youngest of 3 boys and a known troublemaker since early childhood. He had speech issues, struggled in school, and was expelled multiple times. At 11, he pushed a younger boy off his bike and stole it. At 13, he shattered a window trying to force his way into a girl's house after she rejected his advances. His mother defended him every step of the way, insisting he was a good boy. Even when he attacked a teacher and terrorized another until she transferred schools. By 1993, Peter already had felony charges for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Now, Jose Medellin. Jose lived next door to the Cantu family and had a long history of crime. He and his best friend, Efren Perez, were constantly in trouble, stealing cars, skipping school, and fighting. They were violent, unrepentant, and juvenile court regulars. 1 month before the murders, Jose, Efren, and Peter were believed to be involved in a shooting where a man was killed, but they were never charged. Then, there's Efren Perez, 17. His life was marked by instability. He bounced between homes, fought constantly, and fell into Jose's orbit in high school. He once shot an 11th grader twice, just to steal a Raiders jacket. He was never caught for it. Just weeks before Jennifer and Elizabeth were murdered, Efren himself had been shot in the chest. Sean O'Brien was perhaps the most disturbed of them all. He had a violent past filled with animal abuse, attempted suicides, arson, and assault. He once punched his own mother through a glass window. He also pulled a gun on a school security guard and lit school property on fire. Nothing ever stuck. He kept slipping through the cracks. Raul Villarreal was new to the group. That night, he was being jumped in, an initiation into the black and whites. His test? Fight every member of the gang for 5 minutes each. They took him to TC Jester Park around 10 p.m. and made him fight one by one. After the fights, some members left, including Frank and Raymond Sandoval, twin brothers who were loosely associated with the group. That's when Jennifer and Elizabeth walked into the park, unknowingly crossing paths with Sean and Jose. Sean shouted, "Oh look, a couple of chicks walking up." From there, the darkness only deepened. Back at Joe Cantu's house, after the arrests, Christina told detectives everything she had heard. She recalled how Peter had come home later that night, laid stolen jewelry across the table like trophies. A heart-shaped ring with an E, a chain with an S charm, 2 more rings, and a bracelet. Then he laughed and said they had to kill the girls because they saw their faces. Jose described how they strangled one of them with a shoelace, each pulling from one side until she stopped breathing. Raul and Sean used a red belt to kill the other. They laughed as they recalled how the belt snapped from how hard they pulled. One of the girls didn't die right away, so Peter kicked her in the mouth with his steel-toed boots. Then they all stomped on the girls until they stopped moving. In one of the most chilling moments of the night, Raul, eager to impress his new friends, said, "She gave me her number. I should call it. See if they found the bodies yet." Then he laughed and added, "That was fun. Maybe we'll do it again." Christina had to excuse herself and cry alone in the bedroom. The callousness, the cruelty, it was unbearable. She later said, "I couldn't even let Joe touch me that night." She had heard pure evil. That's how 6 boys, some barely more than children, committed one of the most horrific crimes Houston had ever seen. And it was only because of Christina's courage and Joe's reluctant honesty that police knew where to begin. After the arrests, all 6 suspects were charged with capital murder under Texas law. That meant each one could face the death penalty, even if only one had committed the actual killings. Because under the law, if a murder is committed during another felony, like rape or kidnapping, everyone involved can be held responsible. The suspects: Peter Cantu, 18, Sean O'Brien, 18, Jose Medellin, 18, Efren Perez, 17, Raul Villarreal, 17, Uni Medellin, 14. Uni, being only 14 at the time, was not eligible for the death penalty, but the others, despite two being just 17, were tried as adults. The crimes were that heinous, and the community was livid. The brutality of what happened to Jennifer and Elizabeth shocked Houston to its core. These weren't drug deals gone wrong or gang-on-gang violence. These were innocent girls walking home, just doing what they were supposed to do. During their court appearances, the boys showed little remorse. Jose Medellin threatened reporters. Peter Cantu kicked a news camera. Efren Perez had "baby killer" written on the back of his prison jumpsuit, put there by fellow inmates. Because inside prison, even among murderers, rapists and child killers are seen as the lowest of the low. And Jennifer and Elizabeth, they were still children. The trials began in early 1994 and stretched for years. Each of the older suspects was tried separately. The prosecutors were clear. This wasn't a case for plea deals. These girls had been tortured, assaulted, and murdered in ways that demanded full accountability. Their families attended every single hearing. Imagine that. Imagine sitting in a courtroom, staring at the people who destroyed your daughter, and hearing every gruesome detail repeated over and over. Adolf Peña said later, "We had to be there. We owed it to her." The evidence was overwhelming. The stolen jewelry, confessions from Joe and Christina Cantu, forensic findings from the crime scene, matching shoe prints, the broken red belt found in Sean O'Brien's apartment, and most damning of all, bragging from the suspects themselves. Recorded and recalled in testimony, they laughed about it. They thought it made them tough. Instead, it sealed their fate. Sean O'Brien was the first to be tried. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before sentencing him to death. Next came Peter Cantu, the ringleader. The evidence against him was devastating. The jury gave him the same fate: death. Jose Medellin followed. He, too, was sentenced to death. Efren Perez and Raul Villarreal, both 17 at the time of the murders, were too young for the death penalty under U.S. law, but not too young for life in prison. As for Uni Medellin, only 14, he was placed in juvenile custody until he turned 18. Then he was quietly released. Yes, released. That was a crushing blow for the families. Imagine losing your daughter in such a violent, horrific way, and one of the people involved walks free just 4 years later. But the legal battles weren't over. In 2004, over a decade after the murders, Jose Medellin's case was caught up in international controversy. He was a Mexican citizen, and his lawyers argued that his rights under the Vienna Convention, which guarantees foreign nationals the right to contact their consulate, had been violated. The case went all the way to the International Court of Justice, and President George W. Bush even asked Texas to delay Medellin's execution. But Texas refused. In 2008, after years of appeals, Jose Medellin was executed by lethal injection. His final words? "I'm sorry. My actions brought shame to my family. That's it." No apology to the families of Jennifer or Elizabeth. No mention of the girls. Peter Cantu, the ringleader, was executed in 2010. His last meal was 2 cheeseburgers, onion rings, and iced tea. He had no final statement. Sean O'Brien remains on death row as of the time of this recording. His appeals have been repeatedly denied. Efren Perez and Raul Villarreal, both serving life sentences, are eligible for parole eventually. Whether they'll be released is up to the parole board, but the justice system wasn't the only place the families fought. After Jennifer and Elizabeth's murders, Sandy and Randy Ertman, along with Adolf and Melissa Peña, began pushing for victims' rights legislation in Texas. At the time, crime victims and their families had very little say in legal proceedings. They weren't even allowed to read victim impact statements in court. But that changed. Because of their relentless advocacy, Texas passed laws giving families the right to speak directly to the killers at sentencing. It was groundbreaking at the time, and now it's standard practice in many states. Sandy Ertman became a public face for victims' rights. She spoke at rallies, attended hearings, and never stopped fighting. She once said, "If my daughter's voice was taken, I'll speak for her." And she did.
You know, there's a lot of children back here, and I'm going to put myself down at your level. I'm not going to call you sir, I'm not going to call you a fag. You can look at me if you want. Look at me! Look! You're not even an animal. You know I have cats that kill animals? They kill an animal, they eat it. You're worse than that. You're... Excuse me. Look at me. Look at me good. Worse than anything I've ever seen in my life. And I hope to God, and this is wrong too, that you rot in hell. Do you understand that? Just nod your head if you can even think about talking, boy. We live for the day that you die. I hope you rot in hell.
For years after the murders, the Peña family kept Elizabeth's bedroom exactly as it was. Her purple bra, the one she got for her 16th birthday, remained in her drawer. Jennifer's room was preserved, too. Her goofy watch stayed by her bed. These were not just 2 names in a news story. They were daughters, sisters, best friends. Jennifer Ertman, Elizabeth Peña. They were just trying to make curfew, just trying to get home. And because they took a shortcut through a park, something every kid has done, 6 violent boys decided to steal their futures. It all started when Joe Cantu, Peter's brother, reached out to detectives again, this time with something far more chilling than anyone expected. Joe told police that months before Jennifer and Elizabeth were murdered, Peter Cantu, Sean O'Brien, and Jose Medellin had confessed to killing another woman. They bragged about it. They laughed about it, just like before. Joe didn't want to believe it, but after the Ertman-Peña case, he couldn't ignore it anymore. He told investigators they had mentioned a name, Patricia. The woman was later identified as Lourdes Patricia Lopez, a 27-year-old mother of 2. She lived with her father and grandmother and was struggling with substance abuse. But despite her challenges, she was trying to survive, just like anyone else. On January 3rd, 1993, Patricia was last seen at a convenience store around 6 p.m. She called a friend, saying her car had broken down and she needed help. That friend arrived at the location, but Patricia and her car were nowhere to be found. Later that night, a police officer patrolling Melrose Park found a body lying on the grass. At first, he thought the woman might be sleeping, but as he approached, the truth became clear. She had been murdered, brutally. Her blouse was unbuttoned. Her pants and underwear were missing. Blood covered her chest and stomach. She had been stabbed multiple times in the back, neck, and abdomen. Her insides were exposed, slashed open with rage. There were defensive wounds on her arms, indicating that Patricia fought hard, harder than anyone could imagine. Her jeans, soaked in blood, were found nearby. A beer can littered the scene, and under her body, a belt. When Joe told the police what he knew, they began to piece it together. They collected DNA samples from Peter Cantu, Jose Medellin, and Sean O'Brien. And just like that, the case was solved. Jose's DNA matched the blood on Patricia's jeans. Sean's fingerprints were on the beer can. Without Joe's tip, it's likely Patricia's murder would have remained unsolved. Just another forgotten case buried in the system. But Joe's second act of courage brought the truth to light again. The revelation shook the community and the victims' families all over again. These three men hadn't just committed a one-time crime. They were serial predators. Their crimes were escalating. If they hadn't been stopped, they would have killed again and again. The trial for Sean O'Brien included Patricia Lopez's murder. He showed no emotion during any of it. When the prosecution played his confession tape, where he admitted being at the scene, Sean claimed he blacked out and didn't remember the killing. He pointed the finger at Peter and Jose, but no one bought it. Not the jury, not the families, not even the defense team. Within 30 minutes, the jury sentenced Sean O'Brien to death again. But for the families, that didn't feel like enough. Mr. Peña, Elizabeth's father, later admitted he wanted to do more than see justice served. He wanted revenge. The idea that Sean could sit in a prison cell and breathe after what he did to those girls, it haunted him, and he wasn't alone. So when another court ruling came down, one that changed everything, again, the pain resurfaced. In 2005, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that individuals who were under the age of 18 at the time of committing murder could not receive the death penalty. That meant Efren Perez and Raul Villarreal, who were both 17 when they attacked and killed Jennifer and Elizabeth, were spared death. Their sentences were automatically commuted to life in prison. For the Peña and Ertman families, it felt like a betrayal. How could someone old enough to rape, murder, and stomp two girls to death be considered too young to be held fully responsible? But the law was the law. Efren and Raul would live. Jennifer and Elizabeth never got that chance. Despite the heartbreak, the families refused to stop fighting. They had already changed Texas law once, by securing the right for victims' families to witness executions. Now, they worked to ensure that victim impact statements were a permanent part of sentencing hearings across Texas. Before this case, victim impact statements weren't common. They were rare, sometimes even discouraged. But Randy Ertman changed that when he addressed Peter Cantu face-to-face in court. His words were raw, furious. He didn't hold back, and it struck a chord. That statement became the model for future cases across the state. At the end of Peter Cantu's sentencing hearing, the courtroom fell silent. Then, one by one, jurors, families, and court officials began to embrace each other, crying, trembling, releasing emotions held in for too long. Judge Harmon, who had allowed Randy to speak, was later asked why he broke precedent. His answer? It just felt like the right thing to do. So what happened to the others? Jose Medellin was executed in 2008. Peter Cantu followed in 2010. Sean O'Brien remains on death row to this day. Efren Perez and Raul Villarreal are serving life sentences with parole eligibility far in the future, but always looming. Medellin, Jose's 14-year-old brother, was released at age 18 and disappeared from public view. That's the story. Peter Cantu. He wasn't just a participant, he was the ringleader, the one everyone else seemed to orbit around. Peter was born into a working-class home. No severe trauma, no childhood abuse on record. But there was something off, and it showed early. Teachers reported violent outbursts as early as elementary school. He was expelled multiple times. He physically attacked a girl who rejected him. He threatened a teacher until she quit. And his mother always made excuses. The system failed Peter by letting his patterns escalate unchecked. In psychological terms, Peter Cantu exhibited clear signs of conduct disorder as a child, characterized by aggression, disregard for rules, cruelty, and lack of empathy. Untreated, that often evolves into antisocial personality disorder, ASPD, in adulthood. We're talking about people who manipulate, lie, break laws, and feel zero remorse for their actions. Peter wasn't impulsive. He was calculating. He took trophies. He bragged about dominance. He created the rules and expected others to follow. This isn't just a violent teenager. This is the profile of a psychopath in the making. Now, let's talk about Sean O'Brien. Sean's childhood was different. Troubled, violent, and deeply unstable. He grew up in a home filled with abuse. He was neglected. His anger boiled under the surface. He was the kid who tortured animals, setting them on fire, snapping necks, just to see what would happen. Psychologists consider this a major red flag, known as part of the McDonald triad: animal cruelty, arson, and bedwetting. It often correlates with violent criminal behavior later in life. Sean hit all three. He attempted suicide multiple times before 16. He lit school property on fire. He broke his mother's window with his bare fists. He once pulled a gun on a teacher. What makes Sean different from Peter is this: Peter was cold. Sean was uncontrolled, volatile, chaotic, explosive. But both lacked empathy. Both fed on power, and both believed they were untouchable. Then there's Jose Medellin. He grew up next door to the Cantu family, surrounded by poverty and instability. His family was broken. His younger brother, Uni, barely supervised. Jose was charismatic, outgoing, even funny. He was the kind of boy who could charm adults and manipulate peers. But underneath the surface, there was deep rage. He joined gangs early, carried weapons, once shot a man in a drive-by. He called the murder of Jennifer and Elizabeth fun. He claimed he left his DNA behind on purpose. Psychologically, Jose fits the profile of someone with narcissistic and antisocial traits. He saw women as objects, sex as conquest, and violence as a form of status. One expert who reviewed the case said, Jose Medellin didn't kill because he was desperate. He killed because he thought it made him important. Now let's look at group dynamics, because this wasn't just one killer. It was a pack. There's a phenomenon known as de-individuation, when people in groups lose their sense of personal responsibility. They do things they'd never do alone. Peter gave them permission. Sean escalated it. Jose mocked it. Efren and Raul followed. This is the terrifying truth. None of them would have done it alone. But together, fueled by ego, testosterone, alcohol, and peer validation. They unleashed hell. It's known as mob psychology. And in teenage boys, especially those from unstable homes, it becomes a cocktail of danger. So, are these boys victims of their upbringing? To a degree, yes. Peter's unchecked aggression, Sean's childhood trauma, Jose's gang environment. They're all factors, not excuses. Millions of kids grow up in hardship. They don't all rape and murder. So what did this case leave behind? It left pain, yes. But it also left law, voice, strength, and above all, it left memory. Jennifer and Elizabeth were not statistics. They were not cautionary tales. They were real girls in a real summer trying to get home on time. Their story reminds us to listen when families say something's wrong, to fight for those who can't speak anymore, and to remember that justice only matters if it's human. This has been Whispers of Crime. I'm Hannah. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, stay aware, and never stop speaking up for those who no longer can.